Welcome to Business Talk on Business Tech, the show where we take the big strategic conversations shaping South Africa's economy and we unpack what they actually mean for growth and investment and our future. Now, in recent weeks, we've had quite a few important events. We've had mining in Indaba. We've had a State of the Nation address that put energy security and 3% growth firmly back on the agenda. And we've had a renewed focus on infrastructure reform. And I think one theme runs through all of that without reliable, affordable energy, the growth story simply doesn't land. And it brings us to a sector that I think has moved from the margins to the very center of the national debate: offshore oil and gas. Is it an economic catalyst? Is it a bridge in the energy transition? Is it a lightning rod for environmental concern? Or perhaps maybe all three at once? Well, today we're joined by Niall Kramer, who's national spokesperson for the Offshore Petroleum Association of South Africa, OPASA, just to talk a little bit more about how offshore development fits into South Africa's energy and investment mix. Niall, it's great to have you on Business Talk. And at a time where it was quite interesting, Jeffrey Sachs, the New York economist, was in Mozambique recently, and he could see Mozambique becoming a developed economy within a generation. That's thanks largely to offshore gas. So these are transformative resources that we're talking about. Let's just start with the timing, because we've come out of the sonar, as I said, and we've had all of this talk about needing to push growth above 3%. From OPASA's perspective, why is this a strategically important moment to have the offshore oil and gas conversation?
So the most important feature is because of the potential abundance of offshore oil and gas. And I also saw the Jeffrey Sachs interview, or the piece about his visit to Mozambique. And it is a massive vote of confidence from a senior global economist like that, at a time when oil and gas has been under some degree of political and public pressure. And that pendulum seems to be swinging. And certainly in the Southern Africa region, we have potentially very, very significant resources which could be catalytic for this economy. Now, while the debate has been around, and you alluded to this in the intro, around environmental concerns and so on, there is no reason that this industry cannot do this responsibly. The environment is as important to us as to anyone else. It's very important, especially in the case of listed companies, global companies, whose reputations are incredibly important to them. Now, to date, 10 TCF of gas has already been discovered offshore South Africa, and that is huge. To put that into some sort of context, those who are longer in the tooth will remember Mossgas ran on 1 TCF for some 25 years. And so to date, we have 10 TCF already discovered, and potentially there's significantly more than that around South Africa. So to give it some sort of context, it has been hypothesized, and that's the key word here, hypothesized, that there are 260 all up around the South African coasts. And there are three basically large areas for that, coming down from Transkei, then the south coast off Mossel Bay, where the Mossgas find was. But that is where there have been big finds, and those are confirmed discoveries. It's called 11B, 12B. But then if we go around the coast through the Southwest Cape, up into the Orange Basin. Now, the Orange Basin is the area that's of most interest to everyone at the moment, because it's a significant proof point to the hypothesis that we do have something. And the Orange Basin straddles the South African border, and it's something like 60% in our waters, 40% in Namibian waters. And everybody will have heard of the very, very large finds in Namibia that could, and this is speculative, but people are talking about doubling the size of the Namibian economy. by 2040. Yes, it's different. It's a smaller economy. It's less diverse, but those are significant numbers. Similarly, when you go back around the other coast to Mozambique and look at the scale of what has been found there, the size of the prize, I think, is simply too big to be ignored. And the argument that it should stay in the ground, I think, is shifting, and people are starting to take a more realistic and pragmatic and responsible view to energy. We need energy abundance. The biggest issue that South Africa faces is poverty, jobs, growing the economy. And without abundant, affordable energy, that simply never happens. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. It never has. So for a productive, prosperous future, we are going to need energy. And there certainly are signs that policymakers are coming to the fore on this. You may remember the recent IRP, that is basically the electricity plan for the country. And we do need to separate energy and electricity here. They're two different things. But that calls for 6 gigawatts of gas by 2030, and then I think it is 16 by 2039. Now, the obvious question, excuse me, is, okay, that's great, but where does the gas come from? And there are two. So the first one is going to have to be imported gas. We're facing a gas cliff from the little that remains coming in from Mozambique, from Pandia and Tamani. And Pandia and Tamani mustn't be confused with northern Mozambique. It's way down towards the center of Mozambique. It's an entirely different field, and it is onshore. But we will have to import LNG. LNG is liquid natural gas, which is the gas that we hope to find offshore in the deep water. But this will come from elsewhere in the world where these finds have been made. And what happens is the gas is frozen to minus 161 degrees, and it contracts in size very, very dramatically. And then it becomes safe to handle and to transport. And it's a much safer and more economical way to transport gas than via pipeline over very, very large distances. So the reality is there are...
But then you need offshore regasification.
Yes, you do.
How do we then? Yeah, yes. So we would then have gas ships, tankers coming in, offloading, and you'd need that offshore regasification. That's if you're importing gas from elsewhere. If we manage to prove in the Namibian Orange Basin or the Orange Basin that we have that gas available, then it's a question of just building the infrastructure to pipe it directly.
Well, yes, that would be one way, and there are notional plans around pipelines, but the key is to, we go out to explore. That's the first step. And that's the key, is the clue is in the name: explore, to prove. And once it has been proven and what's called sweet spots have been found, that then can be produced, but only after it's been thoroughly appraised for quantity, flow rate, density, and so on. There are a whole host of criteria that it needs to meet for it to become commercial and have a route to market. But the need for the electricity market for gas as a feedstock seems to be just so obvious. And I was talking about the IRP. The recognition of that is in the way the IRP is balanced, with renewables have taken, this is IRP 2025, have taken a significant upward step. Coal is pretty much flat, but gas has taken a very significant increase with that 6 gigawatt, probably half private, half through the state. And but it still has to be done. You alluded to the infrastructure, and infrastructure would be needed all round. So yes, the frozen the liquid gas would arrive in ships. It does need to then be regassed, stored, and then transported either by pipe or by tanker of some sort. Typically, they're called cryogenic tankers, which retain the low temperature. Now, in the Natal area, KZN, the Lily pipeline is one that has a lot of customers, industrial customers, that are reliant on gas. And that gas at the moment is coming effectively down from Mozambique through Gauteng, and then is sent partly down the pipeline. Now, those customers...
Is that the Rovuma pipeline?
It is the Rompco, not Rovuma. Rompco is the...
Sorry, Romco pipeline.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it comes down the Rompco pipeline into the Sasol system, and then some of that, it's called methane-rich gas, is sent down the pipeline to the Lily pipeline, to those customers. Those are the ones that are most obviously and immediately threatened by a lack of their feedstock. When you talk to those customers directly and say, okay, well, what is the biggest risk to your business? They tell you unequivocally, gas. More gas is what is needed. Now, there are areas of Johannesburg that are still using gas coming through pipes to their houses in old Johannesburg. But the key here is from the Orange Basin on the other side of the country, and Block 11B, 12B, which is already proven to bring that to market in South Africa. And it has potentially a catalytic energy effect. We need energy security, we need energy abundance, and those have an incredibly strong role to play in addressing poverty, development, but also in some 80% of our fuels are imported at the moment, with the coastal refineries largely, all bar the Astron one in Cape Town, out of operation at the moment. So that fuel is all imported. So the significant upside from a forex, a fiscal point of view is there. And there does seem to be significant recognition of that. I think we are making some inroads now with policymakers. Certainly the debate has changed from alarmist language around, climate crisis to climate change. And people, I think, generally accept that while renewables obviously are a very good thing, we do decarbonizing. Nobody is going to seriously quibble about taking whatever steps you can to decarbonize, especially with a gas like methane. Anything that does leak out is a commercial loss. You want to keep the integrity of your system in place. But we do need energy security, and it's a very significant geopolitical risk.
And I mean, if you think of it, I think often one of the persistent misunderstandings is that oil and gas is just a narrow extractive story, but there is a full economic ecosystem beyond the energy security broadly, beyond the fiscal benefits directly. You've got the logistics, you've got fabrication, you've got ports, you've got marine services. There's all kinds of skills development through the value chain. You've got downstream industry. And so there are many multipliers within that. And, to have Namibia developing, to have Mozambique developing and benefiting, and for us to be sitting in the middle of these two remarkable turnaround stories and not looking to take advantage of that, just it would seem absolute madness. But to your earlier point, I think some of the concern is around how do we do this responsibly? How do we do it in a way where if you are going to be drilling offshore in very deep waters, in some very dangerous waters as well, how do we ensure that we take advantage of our natural endowment in a way that can minimize the environmental risk? So how is the industry thinking about doing this, given what we've seen previously Shell wanted to explore, and the environmental activists took Shell to court, and eventually Shell disappeared. How do we ensure that we do this in a way that's responsible and pragmatic?
Well, firstly, no one's disappeared. Everyone, there are 10 companies in OPASA, and they, as we sit here now, are still interested. But it is true that there are opportunities around the world which do become very tempting, and we have to, those companies have got to compete for capital within their own companies. There are other interests around the world, very prospective ones. Now, having said that, Southern Africa does have, and it's clear that we have got this resource. So we really need to just tap into it. We've got to come directly to your question around responsibility. This industry is highly regulated. It follows some of the highest standards in the world. And yes, there have been challenges. And it's natural. And these companies do follow the law. They don't try to skirt it. They have very rigorous impact assessments, and those impact assessments, I don't think that many people understand how detailed they are, from water quality, different kinds of fish, rates of currents, what kind of ships are active in areas, what the migration patterns of mammals might be, and then they rate all of those. Well, the first important point is that from studies like this, you have a benchmark. So should something happen, and in 10, 20 years' time, you can look back and say, well, X was what the levels or the activity was back at the time the study was done. All of those items are then rated for impact, and mitigation measures are explicitly shown for those. But one very important thing here is that the stage South Africa around the Orange Basin wishes to go into now through OPASA members is exploration, not production. There are two entirely different phases. The equipment is different. So typically you would bring in, say, a drill ship for perhaps 3 months per hole. And once a discovery is made, the drill ship moves off, and then that product has to be appraised for the qualities I mentioned earlier, after which a decision is then made on commerciality and route to market and where the customers might be. Hopefully, those would be in South Africa, but that they don't have to be. They could be anywhere around the world, in which case the Forex issues I was alluding to earlier on as an outflow become a Forex inflow. And if you look at the tax rates, the royalties, the levies, and so on that are paid, it's very, very significant what flows into government coffers. And everybody knows that we certainly, don't have the most overflowing coffers at the moment. There has been, Namibia has started a sovereign fund, and easily the best one in the world is the Norwegian sovereign fund, which was set up when they found the Ecofisk find in the 60s. And in the mid-60s, they were pretty much where we are. A lot of confusion. Is there something? Well, we don't really know. The economy was rattling along. And then when this find was made, they took an explicit decision to take the find, the bonus that they had done nothing to create. It wasn't some, clever Silicon Valley type invention. And the benefits of that were for the social good. And the interest on that is used for upliftment, for keeping, when the economy drifts south, you have a fund available. Now they've got over $2 trillion. And interestingly, recently I read about one of the South African projects could be one of the beneficiaries of that they would invest Yeah. So
The irony.
also I see that the government
But
employee pension fund has indicated that it is prepared to invest in stage two ready projects. Now, yes, that needs, stage two is not where we're interested in discovery and production, but you can see the debate moving, or the general sense of policymaker and other opinion moving very, very, sadly, I often feel they're moving at geologic time, but it's movement. And for me, the issue
yeah,
of
well,
OPASA is that time window enough for them to move?
and also, yeah,
Yeah.
and now I just want to get your sense on the regulatory environment, because you're talking about exploration. It's costly to sail one of these drill ships out across the open ocean, to spend 3 or 4 months drilling. You're talking many hundreds of millions of dollars in some
Oh,
cases, and
easily.
so you would want some kind of you would want some kind of regulatory certainty that if one does meet with some success, that there is a commercially viable, regulatory, understandable, level playing field and route to market, where, say, for example, if the government does want to take a free carry of a particular percentage in a project, that is known up front. So, you can do the numbers and you can figure out if it is going to be commercially bankable. Do we have that in South Africa yet, or are we still in the debate phase about how we build the regulatory environment?
I think realistically, we will always be in something of a debate phase because it's a commercial activity. No one wants to leave something on the table. But having said that, there is undoubtedly a strong partnership here that all parties understand what we need to do. So, to answer your question, the Upstream Petroleum Resource Development Act has been assented to by the president. It is not yet in law because it has not been gazetted. The regulations that fall under that have been discussed, but have not yet been finalized. And so, to give you an example, you alluded to carry. So there is and carry, for any watchers, is the take that the host government takes off the top. And in some jurisdictions, for example, in the North Sea or the Gulf of Guinea, it's very, very high. But those are proven environments. You know upfront that when you go in, your likelihood of being successful is very high. South Africa is not a proven jurisdiction. We have some success, yes, in 11B, 12B. The hypothesis to be proven that the Namibian finds also exist on the South African side, highly likely. And the carry is at 20% at the moment. And there is some recovery of that of the government's stake in the blocks in the event of success. And you alluded earlier to the hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's absolutely right. You're probably in the order of $150 million per hole. Now, if you've got 20 holes or whatever it is, your risk is very high. And I think what we need to have better understood is that this is other people's money. It's not yours, not mine. It's not the government's. It is the government wants upside, understandably, but they don't share that much of the risk of the downside. And there will always be holes that do not produce anything. And that happened in Namibia as well. One of Shell's came up, and they deemed it not commercial. So the key here is other people's money at risk that they could take elsewhere, and those investments could catalyze future growth for South Africa of the order of what mining has done to underpin a prosperous future. And we're on that journey at the moment, and that will be a responsibly managed partnership. It's not something, this is not wildcatting. For any of your viewers who might have been watching Landman, this is an entirely different matter. Out 150 kilometers out to sea, probably in 3 kilometers depth of water, and then drilling another few kilometers under that. It's a very, very technical business. And for those who might be concerned about safety, they're probably, as we are talking now, around 1,800 rigs around the world doing this. And the depth of knowledge, experience, the development of the tools and materials is huge. Um, I'll give you a practical local example. When the initial drill ship came to 11B, 12B, it was called the Deep Sea Stavanger. It had been built for strong currents, very deep water, and it came out here to the south coast, and it started drilling, and then they said, this is not, there's too much movement here. And the way a drill ship works is it's connected to satellites, and in every direction, the movement is a couple of meters, and they have to hold it on position, and they have to do it through very rough met-ocean conditions of swells, currents going at different directions beneath the ship. So they took a decision after starting the drill that this needed a greater margin of safety. They upped the drill, took the drill ship back to Stavanger, and I think they must have spent probably another 3 years redeveloping it to come back out all that way around from the north, from Norway, around Africa, off to the south coast, and to drill again, and they hit the positive results. So the focus on safe and responsible operation is not a very sexy message for people. When something happens and something goes wrong, well, that's a cool headline. But the headline, nothing happened, is not nobody wants to interview someone who says nothing happened.
But I think again, there's so much misunderstanding, Niall, and I understand OPASA is obviously the industry organization that speaks for the exploration and big oil and gas companies, and so people say, "Oh no, he's only talking to his book." But I think it is important to understand that, and the Norwegian example is a good one, that you can exploit these natural endowments responsibly to the benefit of broader society, but there is obviously that perception that you're going to have to overcome. And it's through conversations like this. I'm sure many people might also think, well, we've got fishermen and we've got tourism, and, we can't be playing with our offshore coastal assets like that, because you might impact the fact that someone's lying on a beach and looking at a drill rig. But you're talking 150 kilometers out. These are not things that are
kilometers out to sea.
Yeah. Yeah. So just dispel those myths for me. What impact, if any, would it have on tourism or fishing or anything like that?
The first thing is that the companies will consult with affected communities. All communities are not affected all the time. So if a fishing community, for example, it's more likely that the large fishing companies, the trawlers and so on, would have an interest than people who were, artisanal fishing people, for something that happens 150 kilometers out to sea in kilometers deep water, one. But they would have an interest because of the potential onshore development. All these companies will have to have lay-down facilities, servicing facilities that they would take helicopters to and from the rigs and ships to and from the rigs. So small harbors potentially could develop and have infrastructure put in that would be significant. But the biggest impact and the most affected parties would be SA Inc. and the population across the country, not just small communities. So tourism, I'll give you, in fact, both fishing and tourism. Anyone who's been anywhere in the Norway stretch between Stavanger and, say, Aberdeen, probably the most drilled and seismic researched area on the planet. Tourism is still very, very powerful. The fishing industry is the second largest export. Now, in the UK, yes, they have pulled back, but in Norway, in Norwegian waters, new licenses are still being given. We have to recognize that oil and gas is going to be with us for a very, very long time. It's not something that you just switch off and everything goes over to renewables. No question, renewables have their place, and they've done a very good job in securing our electricity in South Africa, taking the load off the system. But what's also done that is factories and smelters that have closed, reducing the load. So it's easier to manage a system that's growing at 1% than a system that's growing, say, 3 to 5%. Now, in the hypothesis that all of these plays take off, it's potentially something like 8%. So we need to have an electricity system that is looking to the future, putting in new generation capacity, new grid, and creating that access. Yes, we might be comfortable now, but in a growing economy, we're going to need a lot more to provide the jobs that we obviously so sorely need. And it's not only obviously electricity that oil and gas go into. You know, I mean, I'm looking around the background of where you are sitting at the moment. There are probably 60% of the products around you, from your headphones, glasses, your microphone, the paint in your beautiful Bialetti painting, that have some oil and gas, petrochemical extraction, pharmaceuticals. And the thing about the renewables versus oil and gas debate should not be cast as what do you call it, sort of by, this or that. It's this and that. We're going to need all the power. It's not a binary decision. And it's the energy output that's important, not the form that generates it. So, for example, the energy density that is needed for, say, cement or steel smelting is significant. And you're not going to do that with renewable. Now, that's not saying renewables don't have their place. I have solar panels on my house, and they're fantastic. But you can't do everything like that. We're going to need all the forms of that we can get. And the transition is well underway, but it is not a simple flick of the switch. We need a responsible.
Absolutely. Now, when you look, yeah, and if you look at it, I mean, in the chemicals value chain, there's a global conversation about reducing plastic waste and plastic to landfill, but there's got to be a realization that plastics, chemicals, polyethylenes, all are hydrocarbon oil based and at the top of the value chain, and then get turned into these products, the headphones, in your cell phone, in almost every component that we live with today. So it can't just disappear. And I think there is a much more pragmatic conversation that's being had, which is great to see. Niall, when you look at capital in the sector, I mean, it is patient. Yes, you've said Shell hasn't gone anywhere, but I do think only up to a point. What are the key policy or regulatory milestones that would really signal to global players that South Africa is genuinely open for this offshore exploration and then further development down the line?
I'd say it's a pragmatic approach from government, full authorization, clear, understandable regulations, sovereign contract sovereignty, um, and a development of a better degree. And this is underway at the moment, a better trust basis. Um, and look, while we want speed, we want transparency, we'll work towards that. The DNA of a jurisdiction like this does not have a lot of oil and gas experience, right through from legislators to the public to journalists to people don't really have the concrete day-to-day understanding of how a gas economy might work. So, as an industry, we need to as well put that story out there, show examples, um, and that's really what we as OPASA are about now, is to have a balanced, sensible, but not a fact-free discussion. It's not wild opinions. They need to be evidence-based, and there is a lot of evidence around the world, and we're drawing on that.
Absolutely. And it's in the IRP, as you said. And it's, again, not a binary conversation. These things have to happen concurrently. The development of our renewable resources, the development of our fossil resources as well, all for the broader development of South Africa's economy, the fiscal benefits, the skills and jobs, the energy security and the energy needed to grow, certainly for those heavy users, those hard to abate sectors like iron, steel, and cement, and also the plastics value chain that does depend on these as well. Niall Kramer, thank you very much, National Spokesperson for the Offshore Petroleum Association of South Africa, OPASA. I think if SONA set the growth target and the mining Indaba reinforced the investment imperative, then the energy mix is really where that strategy becomes real. And offshore oil and gas is clearly going to remain a central part of that conversation. Well, that's it for this edition of Business Talk. You can find the full interview on businesstech.co.za or on your favorite podcast platform, and of course on social media. From me, Michael Avery, thanks for watching. And until next time, keep well and keep questioning.